Keep getting set. Sitting with your teams, please. Good morning. Great to see you. All right, continue to chat amongst yourselves until we're ready to get started. Please get settled in. All right, please get your clickers out. I gotta plug in my clicker base. Hold on. No, are we plugged in? Mike, I don't gotta do anything with the clicker base. Thank goodness. All righty. I'm loud, Don says, and he's turning me down because heaven knows that we need to do that. All right, so we're gonna start with one clicker question, which requires that we first watch a Super Bowl 2016 commercial. Woohoo! Exactly. All right. So, if you'll bear with me, you know what a technical dinosaur I am. Let's give this a go. So, everybody pay attention. It's 1:30.
Mr. President, thank you for choosing the moon.
Now we're approaching our lunar sunrise. Oh, this view is magnificent.
This has to be the proudest day of our lives.
Not hungry, huh?
Is he eating?
Nope.
Okay, Commander. Come with me.
Stand by for 10-second countdown.
Roger, looks great, Houston.
Sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's a liftoff. We have liftoff.
Shut up and turn it over to Scott. It's all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I heard a good morning. How about it one more time? Good morning, everybody. Okay. How many people watched the business chemistry videos? Did you guys see that? Do you remember Rob and me from the video a couple weeks ago? All right. Great. Fantastic. So I'm wondering how many of you, when you heard that a consulting firm who does work with all these different kind of clients, doing all these different kind of projects, coming in to talk to you about business topics, what would you normally think that we'd come talk about? Would it be finance? Would it be accounting? Would it be marketing? Would it be project management? All of it. Maybe we talk about return on investment or business cases or any of the sort, right? Well, if you recall, business chemistry a couple weeks ago wasn't exactly about any of that, right? And today, we're going to talk about a topic that I think is absolutely critically important, not only for the business world, but for all of you. I've been doing consulting now for almost 19 years, and I can tell you what we're going to talk about today could be, possibly, bright minds could argue about this, but even more important than some of these topics that I just mentioned. The very first project I went on at Deloitte, they put me on a plane to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to an oil and gas pipeline company. This company shipped propane around the country from point A to point B. And we were implementing an Oracle project, Oracle technology. So first of all, Tulsa. Second of all, it was 6 months long that I was there. But I'll tell you what happened was another project team had been there before us, another consulting firm. And there were a few folks there on the project at the client and an individual consultant that had been hired who hated outside consultants. And they had a very bad project experience. This project had already burned $5 million. I remember this gentleman's name. I remember his face to this day. It was almost 20 years ago. His name was Malcolm. And he was convinced that he and the client could do this all by themselves. And so the project team that was there before us failed. It was a different consulting firm. But ultimately, it was for one reason. It wasn't because of bad finance. It wasn't because of bad business cases. It wasn't somebody calculated the return on investment wrong. It happened because nobody got along. Now I'm going to poll my peers over here who have been on many projects. Show of hands, how many times you've been on a project where people don't get along? Has that ever happened before? I was in Charlotte this week for work, and the home of the Panthers, unfortunately. And I met up with Rachel over here, who was on a project there. Complete coincidence. You'll be proud to know she was wearing a number 18 jersey when I ran into her. We had drinks, but I got to hear about her project and some of the things that were going on, and a lot of it was around how people have not built relationships, how they do not communicate well, how they not bond well. People operate in a silo. People operate in their cliques. People operate in the way they're used to operating in. And when you don't build bridges and you don't build relationships and you don't get along, in the business world, millions and millions and millions of dollars get wasted. That first project that I just told you about is a great example. Every project I've had since then, there have always been conflict. There's always been relationship issues. So we're going to spend time talking about that, right? So we're going to talk about making moments matter. And just like with business chemistry, this may not be the first thing you'd expect us to be talking about, right? But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's dive in. What I'd like for you to do, I guess when you think about making moments matter, there's two parts to it, right? The first part is the moment, and then the second part is how you make it matter. So let's talk about identifying moments for a minute. You're not going to have to share this. This is very personal, right? So don't worry about having to raise your hand or tell anything about this. But think about a moment that mattered to you sometime in your life. Maybe somebody came up to you and gave you a compliment that you weren't expecting. Maybe you succeeded at doing something that you were really scared about or that you didn't expect to do as well with, or maybe any number of other things that were important. You bonded with somebody, you came back together after a conflict with someone. Just give it that a thought for just a second. Okay? Now think about how that moment made you feel. Again, you don't usually hear this in a business setting, right? Feelings. It's easier to talk about numbers. It's easier to talk about strategies and plans and milestones and deadlines. This is very personal again. You don't have to share. What did you feel in that moment? I have a little story to share that will kind of help frame this a little bit. I was at a big partner meeting in Vegas a few years ago, and a very senior partner walked in where I was working. I was sitting down in a cafeteria in Vegas between two casinos, getting some work done, doing some email, and this gentleman walked in. He leads one of our practices. He leads our entire financial services practice. So that's $1 billion business. He has clients all over the world, clients in insurance, banking, securities. He has been working in that practice for 30 years. I worked in that industry, and so I spent maybe 5-10 minutes in my life interfacing with Joe. His name's Joe Guastella. And I worked on a project for him at one point, so again, I maybe had 5 minutes to an hour's worth of exposure with him in my entire career. I walked up to him and said, "Hey, Joe, it's been a while. How have you been?" He said, "Hey, Scott, how are you?" I said, "I'm good." And he said, "Help me remember now. You moved to Denver about 5 years ago, right?" And I said, yeah, I did, actually. He said, "You took on this particular role. You led this team to do this thing, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, I did." And he said, and he went on, and he knew 3, 4, 5 different things about me, right? This guy made a moment matter because you can't get that out of a book. He didn't check his phone to find out about me. He didn't go on LinkedIn. He remembered me. We sat down and talked about his life. He lived in New York. Hurricane Sandy had come through, and we talked about what happened with his family when they were impacted by Sandy. And the reason that I remember all that is because it made me feel a certain way. He made me feel noticed. He made me feel there, present. And I will never forget that. Right? And that's because he took time. It wasn't just me. He's done that with hundreds of people, I'm sure. That is part of his business. He does that with clients. He does that with colleagues. He does that with peers. And he makes people feel a certain way. Now, all of you may be a little skeptical, right? Because I haven't translated any of this to you guys. You guys have to work in teams from today for possibly the rest of your life. Unless you want to work in a lab by yourself or write code by yourself or something like that, you're probably in business going to be working with teams of people. And so this may seem a little far out there for you guys, maybe. But the reality is this is going to be part of your lives in business going forward for a very long time. So give some thought to what that moment made you feel, because that helps you remember. We all tend to remember things that cause kind of permanent or lasting thoughts and feelings. Now let's talk about identifying moments that you've had this week, because moments are all around us all the time. I'll give you some examples. Text is a little hard to read if you're far away, but you met a new person and you made a first impression. That's a moment. There was a crisis in your class. Somebody was supposed to do some work on your team and they didn't do it, and everybody's having to pick up the slack and turn everything in at the last minute. Somebody asked you your opinion for something. What do you think about what's going on with the presidential election? Or can you tell me about this math problem I need to solve? Can you help me with it? You gave feedback. Somebody screwed up. Somebody made a mistake. Somebody offended somebody, right? These are all moments that are opportunities for us, and we have a choice. You can let them go by, or you can do something with them. And they come in all shapes and sizes. They could be with your parents. They could be with the people sitting at your table. They could be with your faculty. They could be unexpected. Most of them, I think, are unexpected, right? All the things we saw in that last slide, we don't know when we get up in the morning if we're going to have a conflict with somebody. We don't know if somebody's going to apologize to us about something. I didn't know I was going to run into Joe in Vegas. They can be big, they can be small. And what's interesting is sometimes it's the small ones that can be the most profound. There's a couple other types too. They're the kind that happen to us, like my story with Joe. And there are the kind that we create. This is almost impossible to read. So the moments that we respond to could be when there's a difference of an opinion, when there's a crisis. The moments that we create are the ones where we go out of our way to do something special, right? It's when we seize on a moment to do something for somebody else, and when we connect people, when we provide an opportunity to get noticed, or even when there is no moment and you make one. If I went out of my way to go over to a member of my team and say, hey, I noticed that you were really present today. You made some great comments. Thank you for your contribution. That's creating a moment, right? They're all around. So why do we even care? Why are we here today talking about this? Because ultimately, if we go back to my story about Malcolm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's all about improving relationships. It's all about getting along better. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this, actually, because of social media. This is before I started thinking about this class or talking about moments that matter. Think about a political thread on Facebook. Somebody posts a political topic or a religious topic or any opinion about anything. How many times have you ever seen somebody post a feed that says, you know, I really understand what you're saying, right? I really want to get to know more about what you're thinking. I really want to have a collaborative discussion with you about your thoughts. Nah, I have never seen that, right? You are an idiot. Oh no, you're an effing idiot, right? You have no idea what you're talking about. I am right, you are wrong. My perspective is correct, yours is absolutely false. It's everywhere today, right? It is everywhere all the time. The inability for people to shift their thinking from themselves and start paying attention to other people. If you and I fundamentally disagree on a topic, politics, anything else, it's very easy to say, blah, 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 blah. This is why I believe what I believe. This is why I believe. This is why I'm right. It is very hard to say, tell me what you think. Why did you come to this conclusion? Obviously, I'm talking to another human being. I'm talking to someone with a brain. I'm talking to someone who has life experiences. They have come to this conclusion that's different from mine for a reason. They may be wrong. I may be right. But they might be right too. So talking about adopting a mindset of getting out of ourselves and into the perspective of other people. How many people think this is easy? Do we do this a lot? No? There's a reason we don't do it a lot, because it's kind of hard. It's kind of easy. We spend our whole life kind of building ourselves up around our ideas and our thoughts and who we are and what we're about. It's very hard to care that much about the other person and what they think, feel, believe, see, the conclusions that they've drawn. So we're going to talk now about how we do it. So I've spent a little time talking about what moments are and how to identify a moment. And I'm going to turn it over to Rob in just a second. I think I have a quote here next. But after that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob. And he's going to talk about how we make moments matter. We actually have some ideas, it's on your table there, around moves that make moments matter. So ultimately, you have a couple choices here today, right? You could sit there and just listen to the words that I'm saying and then, finish the class and walk out. Or you can internalize some of this and decide there might be something to this. It might help improve my relationships with my family, my friends, my colleagues, my team members, my faculty here at school, and actually change something yourself. So Rob, You want to talk about what moves we're going to use to make moments matter?
So with that, can everybody hear me as well? Awesome. Who's familiar with the term resonance, right? Resonance from a wind perspective, from a sound perspective, but resonance. Anyone?
Something resonates with you, for example.
Real quick, so resonance. Can you give me an example of when something resonates with you? Yeah, sometimes it's about like internal inflection, right, making you think. Other times it's external as well, right? When you talk to somebody else and all of a sudden, you know you struck a chord, right? And I'm a big fan of resonance in general. A lot of people will call them warm and fuzzies, right? You say something and all of a sudden you know it just sort of struck a chord externally. You know, the other person nods and all of a sudden completely changes their profile or their perspective on what we were talking about. That's when you know something resonates.
Rob,
Yes.
excuse me for interrupting. As we ask questions of the audience, if you would give us a second to
Oh.
get to the folks with a microphone,
Not a
that way
problem.
we can record for those who are going to watch later. So can I ask a favor? Can you repeat your answer?
So resonance is when something, to me, strikes a chord and it makes me reflect on it more and just think about what the other person said.
Thank you. Okay, carry on, please.
Excellent, excellent. And so when it comes to making moments matter, right, we talk in terms of moves, right? And these are not the end-all, be-all, but we surveyed a number of our clients, a number of our partners, directors, our staff, and said, what is it that people do on a day-to-day? What is it that Deloitte does for you? What is it that other people have done for you that really makes something, that make a difference, right? How do they resonate? And so this is where we came up with effectively 10 moves, okay? And these 10 moves are rather simple. Again, they're really small here, so we have handouts on each of the desks. But what we want to take away is how can we very quickly walk into a situation, right? Be it with a new client, be it with a new team, be it a new interpersonal relationship we're trying to build, and figure out how to most quickly and accurately assess the situation, right? We can use business chemistry sometimes when we're talking as well. But what can we do to make a moment matter, right? Moments are going to surface, or we're going to create the moment either way. But what are this? And we've boiled it up to basically 10 areas, right? Walk in their shoes, where we basically take ourselves out of our situation, put ourselves into their situation, and walk through, why and how is that person thinking, what they're thinking. Showing up. It sounds real simple, but coming dressed and ready to play every day makes a big difference. Putting away the phone, putting down the laptop, right? At the end of the day, when I close my computer to talk to my wife, right? I've had more conversations early in my career with my wife with my laptop open that she recalls perfectly, and they've just evaporated for me, right? And these were moments that were missed by me, right? These were not moments that mattered. They mattered to her in a completely negative way. So understand that when you do these things wrong, sometimes you'll have to backtrack out of them as well, right? Figure out how to make something up or make something matter again. Tailor it. That's tailoring the message, tailoring the situation, not being real generic about what it is you're suggesting. Changing the lens, right? Focusing on something in a different way. Bringing a certain point of view, right? That's being prescriptive. A lot of times, as consultants, it's really easy for us to walk in and people ask us questions. We're the experts. We're paid for answers. And inevitably, whenever you ask a consultant a question, everyone around the room will smile because they know that the consultant's going to answer in one way and one way only. That's right. Thank you. It depends. And then we go into some long diatribe that doesn't always bring the point of view. And what you want is when you're hiring someone, right, or when you're in a group and you're the expert in a certain area, bring the perspective, right? Be prescriptive. Work it together. That's partnering where we can. Suspend self-interest. In a lot of ways, being able to suspend your self-interest and go outside of that norm really drives home the ability to create resonance. Own it. When things go wrong, it's easy to point fingers. It's easy to drive the bus and back the bus back over the teammate that's not here anymore, right? Or to say things bad about a team that isn't in the room. Oh, well, they're late on their deliverable, so I'm late on my deliverable, right? They didn't get me this information, so our end of year project isn't going to come in on time. But being able to own it sometimes completely changes that perspective. when things start going wrong, I tend to be the first person to raise my hand and say, this is on me. I'll come up with a plan to get it fixed. And here's basically how we're going to do this going forward. And in a lot of ways, it shows a lot about your character, and all of a sudden within the room, people are like, this is someone who I want on my team. Right? Say what no one else will, sort of naming the elephant in the room. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to stand up and say what no one else will, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And then finally, upping your game, right? Here's sort of the level at which we all play at. For short amounts of times, we can go to that 120%, 150%, and really make a difference. So with that, I want you to review the printout at the table. We're going to take about a few minutes within the group, right? How have you used, so everybody should have one big handout, right? In this particular case, it's Up the Game. In Scott's, it's Spend Self-Interest. But every table is going to have one move. What I want you to do is, I want you to take a few minutes to talk amongst the group, right? How have you seen this how have you seen this move used before, right? How have you seen it misused? How did it backfire for somebody or you? Have you seen it used well? How is it applicable to your group today? And then finally, has someone used this move to make a moment matter to you, right? Did you feel the resonance because of this scenario? So let's take 5 minutes. I want to hear chatter, talk it up, and then we'll ask a few questions of the group. All right. So in the interest of time, everyone, let's get back to it. All right. All set to start? Let's do this. So with that, I'll do the old teacher trick and just stand right here. You guys good? Right on. Change the lens, that's right. So with that, does anybody have a story that resonated with them, right? Just so happened that you happen to be sitting at the perfect table where some move was either something you used recently or was used on you and had a certain amount of resonance? Anyone? Don't jump in all at once. I'd love a story of owning it maybe, or maybe changing the lens or working it together. If not, you're just going to get a bunch of stories.
I see a hand over here. Coming this way. Oh, you got it. Thank you.
Last semester in our Caesar class, which is our ethics class, we had to do debates. And so for our debate, like I was on the rebuttal side of the debate, so I had to think about what the other team was going to say and the points that they were going to bring up. And I'm changing the lens, by the way, sorry.
Yeah, that was perfect.
And so we had to think about what they were going to say before we even did our presentation and come up with a bunch of different bullet points and things that we could bounce off of. So
how did that work?
Worked really well. We did really well in our debate, and I had a lot of fun, and it was like a good like back and forth with the other team. So
excellent choice. Changing the lens is a great risk mitigator, right? By thinking through what's going to come back at us, right? On a number of different occasions, I can be prepped and ready to go just in case, you know, what I would consider an oddball question for maybe my argument's sake might come at me. I can be prepped for it, right? Anyone else in the room? Any of the consultants in the room?
All right, David's going. David's got a broken arm, and his arm is up like this, and so it looks like he has his hand up, and then he actually put his hand up. So I'm coming your way. Go ahead.
All right, so we have tailored it, and I would say my group has had to make some adjustments in the last 2 weeks with me not being here and having surgery on my wrist. And so we've had to make adjustments for our group project that is due this weekend and next weekend, and shows you how much I know. So yeah, we've made some huge adjustments about like what parts we're doing. I really can't type anymore, like do any of that stuff. It just takes way too long. So our group has made some huge adjustments and helped me out a lot. So I appreciate it for them.
Excellent. What I love about the way you just did that, you owned it, right? That was your way of sort of saying to the group, thanks guys for picking up where I might have left off, right? One more story, anyone? Erica, I saw you raise your hand.
So mine is also tailor it. I had a senior manager on my first project who wasn't a details fan, and I'm a guardian, so I love all the details. I'll put it all out on paper for you. Don't ask me any more questions. It's all there. And so I kept getting emails back from him saying, Erica, why didn't you answer that question? Like, I asked you this 2 hours ago. Where is it? Why aren't you giving me what I need? And I'd respond back, like, I sent it. Did you not see it? It's right there. And I would highlight where I put it. Probably not the best answer. But it took me a while to figure out that he just wanted everything right up at the front. So if I needed something from him, I needed to put it at the top. If I had an answer for him, I needed to put it at the top. And I could put all my details below, but he didn't want to see those at the front. So that was a big way for me to learn how to work with him. And then it worked.
Yeah, and to that end, I like how you wrapped in a little bit of business chemistry, right? Erica and I started working together recently as well. And yesterday I gave her some, we talked about something we needed to get done by the end of the day. And at about 4 or 5 o'clock, I was like, oh, I haven't seen anything. I need to really ping Erica and make sure she's on her stuff. And she had sent it like an hour beforehand. And to that point, you'd really work to sort of learn that style, right? When you're working with pioneers and drivers and the like. Everything I needed was right up at the top. A plethora of details that if needed, are going to be there and usable, right?
Well, and I think if I remember back to when I was sitting in your seats, we're all, as students, you start to get pretty good around tailoring it for what you think is expected of you for the outcome, right? So you read the syllabus, you hear your instructors, and it's like, well, how do they want to hear it? What's the structure they're looking for? What's the answer they're looking for? So you can put it into real terms here this semester around how you tailor your project outcomes to get the grade you're looking for, right? Some level.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to that end, building the relationship helps as well, right? Yes. Anything you can do to build the relationship at the end of the semester, right? Say you're 1 or 2 points off, all of a sudden going in and asking for that little bit of extra credit or what can you do is a big moment that matters. So with that, using the moves can help you make moments that create impact, right? And that's the big takeaway, is you're looking for resonance, you're looking to create impact. The more you can do to do that, the better off you'll be, right? Create the relationship, make the moment matter, right? Or make the moment matter, create the relationship. It's a nice cyclical process. So with that, we're going to focus on 3 moments that matter that really drive home, from our perspective, something that we should all learn to do. And we started with the most risky one. Say what no one else will. This is a calculated move. A lot of people might consider this sort of the ninja move of making moments matter. And the reason is because it can have the most amount of backlash against us, right? I'm someone who speaks his mind rather often. And so as a first year and a second year, I got labeled a troublemaker. And I had to turn it down a lot. Very early on in my career, I thought, everybody always says, oh, well, you're new here, you can bring the fresh perspective, right? And that says a lot, and I use that card all the time. Well, here's what I learned in class, or here's what I learned during my internship. And there came a point where a manager had to sit down and really sort of tailor it to me and go, you should probably calm it down a little bit. Love the enthusiasm, right? But you need to learn when to say it, when not to say it. I mean, I'd be in big executive meetings and say what was on my mind, and it just didn't always work out well. Fast forward, right, to years later, here I am a manager sitting in a room with, on a big ERP engagement, happened to be SAP. I was the finance lead, and we were sitting in a room with the CFO, the COO, and the CIO, and big similar scenario where it was a multi-vendor environment, right? We were working with a competitor firm to make magic happen effectively for our client. And there were some balls dropped, and it largely had to do with the communication between their team and our team. And very quickly, an executive in the room just started saying, "There's nothing, there's nothing that frustrates me more than when balls are dropped like this." And he started basically pointing fingers, and he pointed fingers at everybody but his own team, right? He pointed all the fingers at us, and basically I couldn't take it anymore. All the partners were sitting quiet, and I thought to myself, this is completely unfair, right? He's working with a quarter of the facts. He's not really thinking through what any of us are going through on a day-to-day basis, working till extremely late at night to try to turn these things around. And I said, pardon me, Matt, can we just take a big step back, right? You're working with a very, very few facts, and I don't necessarily know where you got them from. I would love to write up a report, day by day, and just sort of help you understand what we went through. But the reality is that your team has a certain amount of fault here. The competing firm's team has a certain amount of fault, and we have a certain amount of fault as well. I have no problem falling on the pike for everyone if that's what you think needs to happen. But the reality is we should do that in this room, and by the time we leave this room, we need to get out of that mindset, and we need to go with a shared front to the bigger team, right? This is 300 people working on a project. This is big. We need to go to the team and help them to understand that as a team, we messed up, and here's the path forward. And he sat and he said, why is it that you're the one saying this, right? Why is it that nobody else jumped up to say this, Rob? So I can't speak for anybody else, but I just wanted to make sure you understood that this is collaborative. This is something we're all doing together. We're all working hard. And he goes, this is why I hired Deloitte. This is why I hire you. This is why I hope to see you here over and over again, not only on this project but future projects as well. And it was one of those things that it just resonated. And afterwards, you leave the room and a couple partners come and pat you on the back and they're like, that could have completely backfired, man. Good luck. But that's about saying what no one else will, right? Taking the calculated move, making it happen when you need to. There's an elephant in the room, right? There always is. Let's talk about politics, right? We can go get into Donald Trump and talk about that elephant in the room every day, right? We could talk about the elephant in the room that is Cam Newton when it comes to the Broncos game plan. But the reality is there's probably an elephant in the room no matter what conversation you're going into, right? The question is, should you name the elephant, right? Should you call it out, right? Should you take this calculated risk? So why is it important to name the elephant? If you're thinking it, there's a good chance that somebody else is thinking through it as well, right? And they just might not have the wherewithal to say it, or they might not have all the facts that you have. So naming the elephant, right, is an important step. is it the right time to name the elephant? That's the more important factor, right? Just because you're thinking it doesn't mean you should always say it, right? You gotta always weigh those risks. We talked in business chemistry about each individual group, and I want to say it was the integrators that were considered the backstabbers, right? And the reason that they were called backstabbers was largely because they'd come around after the fact, right? They'd come around and say, hey, you know, this is something that we should probably address, but they wouldn't do it directly in the meeting. They'd do it maybe in a much more nonchalant way, which is equally as an important tactic to naming the elephant, right? And determining what that right setting is. Whereas maybe the pioneers or the drivers might just sort of call it out and, you know, not have all the homework done. So you always have to think of the setting. Is it the right setting to name the elephant, right? Are the right people in the room? Is it too big a group? Is it too small a group? Do you have the stakeholders available? And then how should I phrase it? You can take, you know, my tact and just, you know, call it right out. That was my early in my career tact, or you can sort of build up as well. Sometimes you have to build up to naming the elephant, right? You take one meeting or one conversation to build it up and gain a little bit of consensus with one or two people. That one or two people can go to 3 or 4 people, and over time you can really tailor the phrasing around this, right? So no longer is it, hey, there is this elephant in the room and we need to do something about it. It's, have you noticed this scenario? Or could you give me a little bit of your perspective on what I think I might be seeing, right? All of a sudden, by changing the way you're going about talking about the elephant, it becomes a shared experience rather than an experience that you're creating. So how do you say it? How do you take these calculated risks, right? Do your homework. If you're calling out elephants left and right and you are, you know, just brash and it's all from the gut, be prepared for a lot of backlash, right? If you do your homework and someone says, why do you feel that way? Why do you think that this might be the case? You can start to give them perspective back. But brace yourself. In a lot of cases, particularly in group projects and group settings, particularly when tackling problems of project management or change, right, there's going to be dirty laundry. And by calling out the elephant, right, you're going to get backlash of, here's why we do it this way, and you don't have perspective on the years and years of why this occurred, right? You don't have perspective on why this project is set up the way it is, right? And so you have to brace yourself for that. But if you have your homework done, you can start to sort of turn the tide, right? Deliver it with sensitivity. That doesn't mean you have to be really soft about it always, but it's being sensitive to the people you're working with, right? Going back to the business chemistry, if you understand what people are sensitive to, right? The guardians with, you know, their long-term perspective, the drivers with just getting something done, right? The pioneers with the bright and shiny. If you understand their perspectives, you can be a lot more sensitive to how you need to tailor that message. And then finally, brace the audience. And this is what I was referring to when it comes to building them up, helping them to understand how things work. The elephant will yell back, right? It will occur. And the best thing you can do is learn how to sort of take the mental punch, if you will. This is something that is practiced best with friends and family and learning how to do it, not necessarily on social media, right? Because on social media, everyone punches back with as much vim and vigor as they can give you, right? Because they don't think about who you are on a day-to-day basis. They might not have to deal with you on a Thursday night at the bar. So practice this ability and learn how to, you know, roll with the punches when they come back. Has this backfired on anybody before? Has anybody said what they were thinking and watched it just roll back in a landslide of backlash? Or am I the only one? Okay, I got one over here. No one else? So the question becomes, are you just not saying what you're thinking? Is this a group that's just really good at you know, keeping it deep down? Or I'm comfortable with silence. I can sit until someone gives me a good story.
There you go.
Yes, thank you.
So I guess this is a moment where I kind of spoke what was on my mind, and it didn't really work out for me because I had this teacher in high school who was like a really, you know, this was like a good teacher to have in your corner, you know, wrote stellar letters of rec. You know, you wanted this person. And we were talking about the football team. and our high school had like a really poor football team, and we were talking about it, and I kind of was just like, yeah, like I think our football team is like really terrible. And she goes, oh yeah, my husband's the coach. And, you know, I don't think it was a coincidence after that she didn't really write me a letter of rec, or I didn't get an A in her class, so I might have messed up there by speaking my mind.
How might you have made the message if you know if you wanted to, if you would have had a little more context? Would you have just not said it, or would you have maybe give some constructive perspective?
I probably would have just not said it at all. You know,
Okay.
she was pretty emotionally attached to that football team.
Yeah. But honestly, by knowing her attachment, right? If you would have had that homework, you probably could have made the same, you know, a similar comment, if you will, and maybe made something matter a little more, right? Definitely. Me and the student body, we talk about what it would take for us to get behind the team more. All of a sudden, she's thinking, oh man, that's some perspective that I can bring back to my husband, the coach of this bad football team. Right? Very true. So just some thoughts there.
And when we talk about this, Rob, one of the things that come to mind for me is about intent. When you tell your story about that room and the 3 different factions involved, your intent was to get this out on the table, partially to protect us as a firm, but also to bring everybody together and own it so you could get past it and move forward, right? I think if people recognize you have good intentions because you're trying to do something positive, that's the relationship building moment. Just calling out something, calling the baby ugly, just to call the baby ugly, doesn't really, that's not a good intent. The intent is to move forward and build that relationship because you're bringing people together, owning it, saying when no one else will.
Great points. So with that, we're going to play a quick game called the Grapple Game. The question becomes, it's clicker-based, right? So should you speak up? Should you pipe down?
Okay, and for those who were a little late getting here this morning, make sure you get this click. That's how I'll know you're here.
Perfect. So with that, sorry, Rachel, go ahead. Oh, perfect. It's A to speak up and B to pipe down? Excellent. So with that, A to speak up, B to not say anything and just sort of hold it in. So first things first, one of your team members isn't pulling their weight. A is speak up, B is pipe down. I'm sure there's probably a few people pressing C, so I'm interested in what those are. Do we actually see the results? Oh, awesome. Awesome, awesome. We are all speaking up. I like it. This is a great example of something where messaging is important, right? But there's no reason for you not to say it. And having been a part of a lot of school projects, this occurs over the course of time. So there's a few more. We want to make sure to get through all of these, okay? The last one's nice and meaty, so we'll hit it again. Can we restart it? Perfect. Someone on your team said something you completely disagree with, right? Again, safe setting. Do you speak up or pipe down?
Click again.
Exactly. It depends. C is it depends. There you go. The last one is the one I wanted to talk about. Perfect. And the results? I like this one. We're starting to get a little dispersed information. Again, though, speaking up is important here, right? All right, two more, guys. So this next one is a team member decides to take a shortcut that materially misrepresents the data you were using and using it to your team's advantage. I have a great story about this where we did a big data analytics project for a large cable or satellite cable provider, right? It's one of the 2 in town. The net effect, though, was at the end of the day, the data was so weird and dispersed, it really didn't tell the story that the project was trying to tell. And after all was said and done, I went away, I came back, and all of a sudden the data was telling the story. And I was like, where did this come from, right? Is this new data? Did everybody not report, right? This was a scenario where it just didn't tell the right story at first, and then all of a sudden it started doing it. And, this is a very much a real life scenario. And so after all was said and done, when I started digging down, like layer 1, it looked good. Layer 2, it looked good. Layer 3, all of a sudden I started seeing all these weird plugs in the data that were not put in by systems. They were put in by individuals. And all of a sudden, I started realizing it was my team trying to tell the story, and they were doing the right thing. They were trying to please us, please the client, doing all the right things. But we had to put a stop to it really fast. And I said, if the data doesn't tell the story, we'll discount the data a little bit, but it's important to tell that story. So do you speak up or do you pipe down? Assuming you're probably not going to get caught, right? You're one of the few people who understands all the data. So A, to speak up, B, to pipe down. Awesome. So again, no right answers to any of that, but it's important that collectively, right, we don't create synergies that don't exist. So as long as it gets dealt with in any manner possible. So the last one, so we'll reset this one more time, and this one I'm going to ask for a few volunteers to talk through, but a professor questions the factual integrity of a team member's work in front of the whole class, despite you knowing it's authentic. This is an interesting scenario, right? This is a scenario that you have to really look at the calculated risk because it could have long-term effects. So speak up, and this is in class, right? Speak up or pipe down.
You criticize the Broncos while doing it.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. Speaking up. So first things first, who clicked speak up? And can you give me an example of how you might phrase it? So
I don't know, not necessarily knowing how to phrase. I'm loud enough, but thank you. Oh, thank you, Mary Beth. So I don't necessarily know always the appropriate way to phrase things because I'm a tad bit blunt. However, I know most teachers, especially here that I found, are very open to listening to whatever we say. And by maybe informing, look, I know for a fact that they did all this information. Maybe you don't know what they did, but I watched them do it and I saw how they worked through it. Giving maybe the teacher the information that they're missing might be a way to be able to call them out without being rude about it and get them to acknowledge, like, well, if somebody's advocating for another student, maybe there's a reason for that advocating. Yeah. And if somebody else advocates, a lot of people who have experience also tend to look at it and go, there's a little bit more merit than maybe I thought. So that might help change their perspective.
Great. Yeah, the study that you brought up is footnoted, as you can see, in on page 34 or whatever. So perfect. Who piped down? Now everybody, yeah, it's the same type of people who don't raise their hands. Anybody? One person who piped down, and would they eventually bring it up, and how might they do it?
Because it may just be that it's not the right time and place, but you can still do something about it.
But you still might do something about it.
What do you guys think? Well, we had 17%, 18, somebody.
I think clearly these are the type that just stayed piped down. Right on. Okay, so with that, we'll move forward. So things to remember here: considering your timing, motive, and intensity. Right? Not all of us want to be, pioneers who say it right now, don't really think through the repercussions, and say it as bring it home as much as possible. Right? But build the courage to call it out. Start out mastering and building relationships first, and then pull the advanced move. Right? And then finally, move with caution. This is not something to be taken lightly. Understand that it will backlash, but try it out, right? Saying what no one else will is really powerful. Don't be the guy who does it all the time. I know for a fact it doesn't always work itself out, but learn how to do it and practice the move.
All right. I'm happy to announce that it's break time. 10 minutes? Is that right, Mary?
10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene. More discussion, more clickers coming up.
Stay tuned. Well done.
Let's please reconvene. Please rejoin your teams. Please refocus your attention. Rob, are we starting with you? Are we starting with Scott? Where are we going? All right, if everybody would please give Scott your attention. We're going to get moving again. Thank you.
And we're back. All right. Walk in their shoes. So I mentioned earlier this trend that I see so much around us, around everybody being so quick to share their own opinion about things, everybody being so quick to be sure that their view of the world is the right one, and being so slow to consider how other people might contribute to that dialogue. So we're going to spend some time talking about this a little bit. Anybody want to tell me what their take is on what empathy is? This is sometimes could be a little misunderstood word. It sounds a lot like sympathy, and it's a little bit like that, but not totally. Anybody want to share? Right here.
From what I understand, the difference between empathy and sympathy is that with empathy, you might not be able to directly relate to what someone's feeling or going through, but you have to put yourself in their shoes and try and understand what emotions and whatever tribulations they're feeling, but maybe you have no actual direct experience with it.
Excellent. Excellent. I really like that part around maybe not having the direct experience with it. We may come from very different backgrounds, and that is what makes it harder, right? It's easier for us to relate or empathize with other people if we come from a similar background. It's a lot harder when we don't, right? Excellent. So sympathy might be something around, you feel bad for someone. They're going through a hard time. But there's a little bit of a difference between able to understand they're going through a hard time and actually putting yourself in their situation and understanding what they're thinking and what they're feeling. Okay? So that's a big part of what we're going to talk about with this one. So let's imagine that your team at your table is getting a new participant joining the group. They're a pioneer. You know this much. You know that they work part-time at Christie Sports. I don't know how you actually know all this, but let's say you do know this. They have a full course load. They're an adrenaline junkie, which goes with being a pioneer, and also may not be afraid to fail, which also may go with pioneer. So I'd like for all of you in your groups to take just a few minutes and talk about ways that you could get this person involved in your group. And obviously, there's a couple different ways to do it. You could do it without walking in their shoes. You just get them onboarded, right? Tell them all about your project, what you need to get done. Or you could think a little bit about walking in their shoes. So spend just a couple minutes talking about that, and we'll come right back. I think mine's. Okay. Everybody, let's go and debrief. Clearly a lot of good discussion. All right. Looking for volunteers. What do you guys think? What would be some ways that you could bring a new person into the group using this, this particular move around walking in their shoes? Looking for some hands on this side of the line next, by the way. Yes, go ahead.
We were talking about specifically to our project how the marketing portion has a lot to do with like making projections and estimates. So we were saying that he would fit well into the marketing portion of our project.
Okay. So you might want to try, based on what we already know, we might want to line up the opportunity on the project with what they might be good at or what they might be interested in. So you're hypothesizing or you're kind of hunching what they might be interested in. What else?
We said they might be more interested in like idea generation or like pushing a specific idea forward and trying to roll with that. So,
okay. Just acknowledging that they might be interested in a very specific thing. You got a hand up in the very back of the room.
One of the big things that I liked was that they weren't afraid to fail. So when you, like, if you don't do well the first time, like sometimes people get flustered and they end up making more mistakes. So the fact that they're not afraid to fail is cool because I think it gives them an opportunity to like take a deep breath and like look at it with a different, with a different scope, and I really like that.
Very good. Okay. So what's a technique we could do to find out what they might really want to be involved in? Ask a question. I love it, right? So that's one way to walk in their shoes, to understand who they are and what they're about, is to actually figure out how you would find out more about them. So we're going to talk about questions in just 1 second. The first thing, and this is kind of interesting, again, going back to my example over and over around our desire to kind of share with other people our own point of view. This is the hard part about walk in your shoes. I think the whole thing's hard, but this is extremely hard. What do you think take off your own shoes means, other than taking off your shoes? What does it actually mean? This is a big move right here. Yep.
It means to suspend your own ideas and opinions for a little while.
Very good. How easy is that? If I'm sitting across the table with somebody who has very different ideas about the world or about the topic we're talking about, and I say, okay, I'm willing to put down, maybe I disagree completely with my parents on politics. Let's use that as an example, right? All right, I'll put that down. I'll put down my opinions, and my whole goal is to understand what you think, is to understand why you believe what you believe. I will suspend, to use your word, I'll suspend my biases, my prejudices, my perceptions, my opinions, and learn about what you really believe and how you came to this conclusion. Because normally we respect that person, right? I mean, I respect my parents. I think they have valid ideas and valid agreements. So how can I say I respect them and then say, well, their ideas here, they're just crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. So taking off your own shoes, it's very hard. So when it comes to our new person on our team, if we're going to bring them in, how do you really get to understand what they're going through? Maybe if they transferred in, after the class already started, maybe there was something in their life that was disruptive, right? Maybe there's a reason they started late. Maybe they had surgery on their hand. Maybe they had something going on in their personal life, right? And some of this, it's easy to go to, to really try to understand their personal situation. It also may be more about their interests, right? What they're good at. If they're good at marketing, let's put them on the marketing piece of the project. But it's really putting aside our own biases and suspending our own beliefs for the moment, and then thinking through all the things going on with them. And you'll notice there's a lot of things there that we listed. I like the one at the top. What about ambition? It's important to know, is the person that's joining your team somebody that really wants to be successful, really has a passion in a particular area, or they just want to get by. Maybe they just don't care. And you probably need to know that. You may not need to know why, but you may want to know what their ambitions are. The pressures they have going on in the workplace or their lives. We use the term fears, vulnerabilities. Everybody's a human being. So to really understand that new person, and I would suggest that this applies 100% to teams that you have now. There's a lot going on at each one of these tables. You all have a lot of personal responsibility. You all have a lot on your mind. Your life, your friends, your social life, academics, leadership, your job. Some people may be struggling financially. Some people may be struggling with something we don't know anything about. There's a lot of dynamic that goes on in a team, and just being interested and aware of learning about another person goes a long way. So let's talk about asking. We got the answer finally, that if we're going to find out where we want to onboard them on the team, we might want to ask about them. So let's talk about how we ask. What's an open-ended question? Anybody want to share what that is versus a closed-ended question? This side of the room, anyone? Come on, this is a softball.
So an open-ended question would be like asking the person, so what are some of the things that you enjoy doing outside of school?
Exactly. What do you enjoy doing? That's an open-ended question. A closed-ended question is kind of yes or no. Do you like basketball? You get a very different understanding of someone by asking, what do you like to do, versus do you like basketball? That's a very narrow kind of questioning. What's a leading question? And then we'll move off this topic. But what is a leading question?
A leading question would be a question that you expect a certain answer from. So maybe asking something like, oh, you're not going to be able to get that done tonight, right? Or something like that.
Exactly. You love the Broncos, don't you? Surely you don't think the Panthers are going to win, do you? Leading question. And there I even use an inappropriate tone. Got it both. Right? Okay, so if we take off our own perceptions, biases, and suspend our own opinions, we have a genuine desire to learn about the other person, understand what they're going through or what their priorities are, their objectives are, learn more about them, and we ask effective questions like this. So I don't see any of these being leading questions. I don't see any of them being closed questions. These are very open. What do you mean by that? Right? That's very open-ended. How did you come to that conclusion? Very open-ended. Can you tell me everything you know about this situation? These questions are fundamentally meant to foster dialogue. So what I'd ask you to do is to talk in your groups just briefly about how you might go about answering the questions in those bubbles. How do I go about learning what do I already know about this person, and what questions can I ask to gain additional insight? So back to this scenario, new person's joining the team, as opposed to just what we already knew about them, about Christie Sports and Afraid to Fail. How do you ask the right questions? What would be the kind of questions you would ask to get a deeper understanding of who this human being is? Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so let's go ahead and debrief. Lots of good discussion going on. All right. Anybody want to volunteer something they talked about, something that you learned, something you came up with around how you'd engage this person to really understand more about them? We'll just ask for one point of feedback here. Anybody? Help me out so we can move on. What do you think? Did you guys talk about the weekend? Talk about the game? Okay, here we go. We need a mic. Oh, right here, sorry.
So I was thinking you should ask what do you do with your free time, so you can not only know just how busy this person might be or free, but you can know what they do, what they're interested in, and just get to know them better altogether.
I think that's great. That's a great relationship builder in general, right? What do you like to do? I like to do that. Fantastic. Okay, you want to do one more since we had a hand here? You thinking you were off the hook?
We would ask them like where they had been and what's maybe going on to understand like how to better put them in our group if there's something like bigger going on than we understood.
Outstanding. Very good. Thank you. All right, my clicker suddenly doesn't work. Can you advance the slide? Thank you. Is that not working either? Maybe it's not the clicker.
The computer.
Yeah. That's okay. This is perfect timing, actually. I have one other slide, but what I wanted to do is ask my colleagues.
Oh, there you
go. All right. So we're going to finish this slide, then I'm going to ask my colleagues for a walk in your shoes story because I think we have a couple really good ones. So consider the implications of what you now know when choosing what to do next, right? So depending on what you hear about what they like to do in their free time, or what we heard back here around where they've been, or maybe they reveal a personal piece of information about themselves. Now you have some context around how you communicate with them, right? They just had a tragic loss in their family, and that's why they are joining the party late, right? They're coming in 2 weeks late or whatever it might be. That gives you a lot of information about sensitivities, right? All right, so do any of my colleagues have a walk in your shoes story that they would like to share? Kate, right over here. Kelly, right over here. I just met Kelly this morning. Hi. How are you? That's a way to make a moment matter in the wrong way.
That was a backfiring moment.
That is a bad moment that matters.
That
Sorry, Kelly.
really resonated with me.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. You're going to remember that for a long time.
By the way, I was recently in all of your shoes. I just graduated last May, so I'm pretty new to all of this. But a story that I had was pretty recently. I've been working with a client, and they're just doing all of these designs for a completely new system. Like Rob, I also work in SAP. So they're very unfamiliar with the system, with the designs, with the processes. And I was going into a meeting, and I'm a driver, so I had a laundry list of things I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about X, Y, Z, and get it all done. Well, the client doesn't exactly know everything about X, Y, Z. So what my colleague did is he actually did a demo of one of the systems with the client instead of putting my laundry list in front of them, and they were really appreciative. I mean, to tell you like the level of confusion, pretend you just started watching Game of Thrones and you're on season 1, but I want to talk to you about season 5, and you don't know who the Lannisters are, so it's confusing. But all in all, they were really excited that they got to see the system, they got to learn a little bit more about it, and then in the end, they're more willing to work with me on my list of topics that I wanted to talk about because they actually understood it a little bit better, and they could see and visualize the functional designs that we needed to create for them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. All right, let's talk about, let's wrap up Walk in Their Shoes. I do think this is, I mean, we have 10 moves here that Rob introduced. This one's huge, right? To truly master this is an incredible skill that will take you a long way in life, both inside and outside of work. So take off your own shoes. We talked about the word is suspend. It's very hard to suspend ourselves. Think through all the things that are going on in the other person's world. Really focus on them instead of on ourselves. And then consider the implications about what you've learned around how you want to engage and interact with them going forward. All right? Okay. Rob, over to you.
So with that, let's talk about the baseline. Showing up. Without showing up, all these other moves don't matter, right? This is your bare minimum move. New hires come in, and I'm lucky because being a part of recruiting, I get to talk to them usually on their first day, and inevitably they always ask the right question, which is, what can I do to make a difference, right? What can I do to really become ingrained in the culture of Deloitte? And the answer is always, number one, show up, right? Come dressed and ready to play. If you do not come dressed and ready to play, everything else you might do is fruitless, right? And coming dressed and ready to play means a lot of things to a lot of people. And so what I want to help people with is helping them to understand, right? How do you know that you've showed up, right? How do you know that you've really come to make an impact? So sometimes it's about listening, but it's really about active listening, right? It's about being a part of whatever it is going on. Without that, you can't change the lens. Without that, without being an active listener, you'll have a really hard time saying what nobody else is saying, right? So with that, think about 3 people who are good listeners, right? What do they embody? And we're a little short on time, so I'm not going to ask the questions, but I want you to really sort of try to embody this and think it through. But what distracts us from being a good listener? I'm going to go ahead and unroll all this right now. Computers, as an example, guys, make active listening really hard, right?
Everybody's looking around to see as their laptop's open.
A great example of this, right? Over and over again, I get into meetings and as good consultants, as good business analysts, other people in the organization, everyone comes with their laptops. Inevitably, everyone starts out with the greatest of intentions. We are taking notes, right? We are on point. We are focused. But what happens? It's so easy to see an email pop up, right? Someone IMs you, and you start working on a different problem. And so being an active listener is really, really hard with IM conversations, with texts, with phone calls, with emails. You walk out and you're thinking, I'm going to go get this done, and someone walks up to you in the hallway and starts, completely driving you in a different direction. And so being an active listener and knowing what distracts you is paramount to all this other stuff, right? If you get ingrained in a IM conversation, how are you going to say what no one else will, right? How are you going to walk in someone else's shoes? How are you going to pick up what business chemistry section someone might be in, right? How are you going to understand what it is you're dealing with? So put away the distractions, right? Show up, come dressed. That doesn't just include single interpersonal relationships and interactions. It includes looking around, right? Understanding everything that could be a moment, right? Example, so I'm an ex-member of the Greek system. I notice all like the letters, right? The chi si's and the kappa gammas, et cetera. Like these are things that, if and when those people come and talk to me, that's an instant icebreaker, right? Instant conversation starter. Easy way to gain a few points with me, right? As an example. But without being open and understanding what's going on in the world, right? And coming dressed and ready to play, that those situations just, they don't happen, right? So showing up means listening up, right? It doesn't mean just sort of sitting there and nodding the head, right? Everybody actively listens different. I have a colleague who, throughout the course of a meeting, go, and I constantly wonder what he's thinking because he never speaks up. I think that's his perspective on active listening, and I brought that to his attention and told him something that no one else will, I'm sure. And so hopefully he figures out what he wants people to interpret that as, right? But the reality is he probably never really thought about it, and he internalized that that's active listening to him, right? Active listening to me is listening to what people said and playing it back to him, right? Playing it back to him, hopefully with a point of view, right? Hopefully by walking in their shoes, right? Playing those other moves, but again, the baseline. If you don't show up, if you're not dressed and ready to play, you just can't advance in the game, right? So be a good listener. Be an active listener. Be someone who can play it back. So showing up is more than just about active listening. It's about being engaged, right? So how can you be additionally engaged? Are there ways in which engagement tends to heighten, right? And what I like to do is, again, talk about resonance. If you can sit and listen and play back, honestly, that says a lot about who you were and what you were doing during a meeting. Quick show of hands for those who have been on like a long-term phone call or done something that they were somewhat passive in, right? How much of the percentage did you take away from that? And I'll ask the colleagues first, just so you guys can really understand what it means to be an active listener on a phone call, right? So the minute you mute it, what do, right? Did you take away 100% of the information? No. No, right? Yep. Did you take away 50% of the information? Sometimes, yes. That's exactly right.
Depends.
Yep. On a Friday, if it's a phone call that I have, it's really tough for me. And the reason it is because I tend to be at home. I tend to have 3 kids running around, right? It tends to be really hard to be an active listener. And so what I've taken to is closing the laptop, is taking myself off mute, because the minute I do those 2 things, I'm checked out, right? I am worthless to the world, and what ends up happening is I can't make any of the other moves because of it. I have to later talk to my analyst, right? Or I have to talk to anybody who happened to be on the call. Hey, this is what I heard, and then we start talking, and we realize that we were both on mute, and we heard slightly different things, and it becomes problematic, right? By the way, we don't do client calls on Fridays. That's an important factor for all of you. We tend to do internal calls on Fridays, right? Client calls are throughout the week. So again, be engaged. Do little things. It's all about the little things here that make the most difference, okay? So a few pointers on being present, right? It's not a bad thing to be present for a lot of people, but for those of us who think we can double task, right? For those who think we can multitask at more than 2 or 3 things, the facts are out, right? It's not possible. It's possible to be slightly engaged with everything, but it's not possible to be 100% engaged in everything we do, okay? So come prepared. Easy, right? Figure out what you're going to do. Figure out what constitutes success in anything you're doing, right? Ask the question. Actively listen, right? Spend 90% of your time focused on whoever it is that is speaking and not on something else. Remove your distractions. That includes shutting the laptops. I love it when people shut the laptops when I say things like that. And get your head in the game, right? And that includes responding, right? The more you can do that, the better off you are. For those of us who get tired in meetings or classes, I am that way as well. I tend to burn the midnight oil till extremely, extremely late. Whenever I see, feel myself nodding a little bit, and hopefully that doesn't happen to anybody in this particular class, but it'll happen over time. Stand up, right? Take a few steps back, pace the room a little bit. All of a sudden, people are like, "Wow, that guy's a player. That guy's really thinking about something." But realistically, if you know me, it's just because I'm getting really tired, and I want to stay engaged and I want to stay active. So again, a few pointers from those of us who have been there.
I like that BlackBerry from the 1940s up there.
Yeah.
Is that a new Samsung we got going?
When I graduated, all I wanted was one of those old BlackBerries. I thought that's how you knew you had made it. So with that, again, remember, remove the distractions, be a good listener, and then showing up equals being engaged, right? If you're engaged, all of a sudden you open yourself up to every one of these other moves. With that, let's talk for just a moment about the moves. I think we have about 5 minutes left. Stories people want to share. I think this is a subject where stories tend to get the juices flowing, right? It tends to really bring home the moves themselves. Anybody have anything that they've either taken away from the class, made a moment that mattered, had a moment matter to them? And that goes for helpers and consultants in the room as well as teachers, as students. We'll make Adam go first.
Yeah, I'll give you a good moment that mattered to me. It was kind of an emotional moment on a project, and it wasn't even my own issue, but it was
started with Adam crying.
Well, I mean, most conversations they end in a tear, either myself or the other party. So I'll keep it together, you guys. Oh, sorry, don't want to look bad to my alumni here. But in any case, I was on a project, and we were working very, very long hours into the night a number of different times. And one of my colleagues I kept noticing was checking their phone over and over again, continually checking their phone. And I wasn't really sure what they were looking for. And I was trying to do as much work as I could. And I mentioned to him, said, hey, is something wrong? Do you want me to take over for you? He said, oh, no, I'm sorry for being distracted, but my wife right now is actually in labor. I said, oh, my goodness, what are you still doing here? And apparently throughout the day, it was an early delivery, and I told him, look, you should probably go there. And it was a few-hour drive from where he lived. You need to be there immediately. I can take over for this. I can handle it for you. We can communicate. You need to be there for the birth of your child. And he said to me, Adam, you know what? I trust you. I think you can do it. I stayed up all night doing as much work as I could for him. And he was able to get there. It was a false alarm, and the baby actually came a few weeks later. But in any case, it was a good moment for me because I was able to show him that he could trust me with this type of work in this critical moment. And it really went a long way for the both of us as a relationship. So now if I'm ever in that 11th hour, then I'm going to ask for the same favor.
Yeah. Well, what I love about that is there was a few different moves all at once, right? You had to show up, right? You had to really understand and catch what people were doing. All of a sudden, you walked a mile in his shoes for just a moment, and understood where he was coming from, and then very quickly you suspended self-interest and took on the additional work, right?
And practiced empathy.
Yeah. Yes,
that's
well
right.
played, well played.
And just to be clear, that is not a Deloitte value that we expect people to work through babies being born. We really encourage people to be home for that.
Yeah, indeed.
Anybody else?
Additional stories? I think we have time for about maybe one more, two more.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Sprague. I'm with Deloitte. Hoping to hear some of your stories, but since there are no hands. One thing that I did want to just talk about with the moves that matter is that it does involve suspending self-interest, right? Like maybe Adam had something going on that night that he was looking forward to, and he was like, oh, shoot, but this is an opportunity to make a moment matter and to help somebody out. So for me, I volunteer with a couple different organizations outside of Deloitte, and I work with kids from the city of Denver. And so I get to practice these moves with them a lot. When I see them, all of a sudden they're really quiet, and I'm going, hey, what's going on? And they're closed off. And so it involves me going like, okay, I was totally planning on going home and spending some time with my wife. I just got back from traveling, and all that's going to change for a second. And sitting down with someone and saying, what's going on? What are you experiencing right now? And so I had one kid who was just real quiet. Took me probably half an hour to get him to open up, and finally he was like, just nobody's at my house right now. Like I'm living on my own. So for a full week, 16-year-old kid had been living on his own because he only has his dad there, and his dad wasn't present. And so, we talked through that and worked out ways that we can help him. But I would just encourage you guys as you move on in your careers to find those things, find ways that you can suspend self-interest for a little bit and give back, find a way to do something for somebody else, because you will get to practice these more in that than you will anywhere else, and it'll serve you well. Plus, it's pretty rewarding. So,
thanks, Ben. Good one. Okay.
I think
so
Ben
this
gets the Story of the Day award, by the
that's
way.
Right.
Well played.
Right. That's right. That's right. So at this time, I think we're going to wrap up here. Do you want to say the last few words, and we'll turn it back to Mary Beth for final comments?
So with that, I mean, use the moves, right? Make the moments matter and create a lasting impact. Relationships aren't a one-way street. Anything you can do to create a relationship, right? Whether it's in your project, whether it's with your instructors, whether it's with us, right? It's time well invested.
Alrighty, so a couple of things. One, thank you to our friends from Deloitte for today's session. All right, secondly, I hope you all take some of this and apply it in your teams. I know we are working hard on that Ratio project that is due next weekend, and maybe we're floundering around, so find some ways to rely on one another and build those team relationships, all right? Thank you all. Great weekend. We'll see you next week. What's that? And go Broncos! Woo-hoo!